Well, what are October layoffs saying about this economy? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, I want to make sure that you have the resource to get that question answered. And you can go to www.prudentmoney.com. And at the top of the page is a link that says Ask Prudent Money. Just click through. We'll get you taken care of. It's very easy to get answers to your questions or resources or whatever that you need. That's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. And while you're at the website, make sure you sign up for the email newsletter list. That's the way we keep you posted on what you need to know. And that's easy to find there on that front page as well. So lots of resources and blogs and all kinds of things at the website. And if you ever want to listen to the podcast of this program, you can always go to your favorite podcasting platform and just Google search Prudent Money, and you'll find us, and you can listen to it on your own time. Today, though, we're going to be talking about a lot of the questions that I'm getting. There's just so much going on, and in the news all over the country, all over the world. So we want to make sure and cover some of these news items so that you know exactly what is going on. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the economy, talk a little bit about unemployment. As you know, because of the government shutdown, the Department of Labor decided that they were not going to release any type of guidance on unemployment or anything like that. So we're kind of left to our own devices to figure out, well, what is really happening as far as layoffs go, and what's really happening with unemployment or employment, better said, in general. And fortunately, there are some companies that report the same type of information, and we can get from them exactly what's going on. So there's a company called Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. Interesting title of a company. All last names of the people who are partners of it, I'm sure. And they state some pretty sobering information for October layoffs, saying that they were the highest they've been since 2003. And they also say this is also the highest single month total for layoffs for the fourth quarter since 2008. So not real good news that you want to hear. And it'll be interesting to take this information with the Challenger, Gray, and Christmas and compare it to the Department of Labor and what they've got on their records. You got to remember that getting an exact number or even close to an exact number, and I've always felt this way, is pretty tough to do. So it's just kind of showing you with the trend that we're heading on. I would say just kind of through the research that we do here, and I would say that 153,000 job layoffs probably is in line with reality. I would think that there would be some negative information, some negative economic news. But what will be even more interesting is when they do get caught up and they announce these numbers, how the market reacts to it. You know, is that something that the market already has kind of an understanding of and accepting that this news is going to be bad? You just have no idea. Once you think that you figured it out, that the market's going to go up if this happens, or going to go down if this happens, it never seems to work that way. It says researchers noted economic downturn slowed spending by consumers and employers, including measures like hiring freezes as the reason for bountiful layoffs. AI was also a key factor with Andy Challenger, Chief Revenue Officer for the research firm, saying that, like in the early 2000s, a disruptive technology is changing the landscape. I would agree with that to a certain point. I think that what we're talking about today is a whole lot more disruptive from the standpoint of a disruptive technology than maybe in the 2000s during the tech bust. As I told you, or I've talked about in the past, what we're looking at happening here from an economic standpoint, layoff standpoint, it looks a lot like what happened between 2000 and 2002. But we've never experienced, in fact, I think it's probably a good time to talk about this, never have really experienced what it means to lay off people because of technology. Now, granted, that's happened before. It slowly happens right now, I'm sure, because new technologies are always introduced into the system. In fact, if you look at how you ran your business today versus how you ran your business 20 years ago, I would be willing to bet that you have less employees and are doing things a lot differently, a lot quicker. So it will, I personally don't think that there's going to be this wave of layoffs real soon. I think one of the problems that the technology sector is going to, and AI sector is going to run into is that it's going to take a lot longer than investors are expecting. I think investors are expecting immediate turnaround on new technologies and AI and all that type of thing, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a different roadmap to get where they want to go. So unknown, what does this number, if a true representation, what does this do to inflation? What does this do to interest rates? And here comes the very interesting aspect of any of these economic numbers that come through. And that is, if, to fight inflation, and we definitely have some inflation in the system right now, and hard to tell if that's building or if it's just a hangover from the inflation that we've gone through over the past 2 or 3 years. But if with out of control inflation, which I wouldn't call that as representative of today, with inflation as it is, that would cause the Federal Reserve Board to raise interest rates to fight that inflation. But when you've got a softening of the employment markets, that's a very sensitive area, something that can get away from you, from the standpoint of I think that you have to be quick and react, as opposed to kind of chasing the problem like the Fed's done some in the past. And this would mean that the Fed would have to lower interest rates. So what does that do to inflation? Tough to say. Real tough to say. Now the Fed, this is called stagflation, in case you're wondering. And you're probably thinking, nope, don't need another economic term in my life. But stagflation is when you've got a recession and you've got inflation at the same time. Not the best way to go. Now, you add all that up and put in the Supreme Court's skepticism about Trump's tariff authority, and the picture gets a little bit foggier. Or it could get clearer. Potential tariff rollbacks would lower import prices but remove protection for domestic manufacturers. I think that whenever the Supreme Court does comment on whether or not President Trump had the authority to issue tariffs or not, I think that you're also working against a clock, and it's going to be tough for businesses to all of a sudden just lower prices if they are adding in tariff costs and that kind of thing. So this will probably get a little bit murkier before it gets clearer. One of the things that I was going to bring up towards the end of the program, but I'll go ahead and bring it up now, was the piece of advice that I gave, I think last week, about during our annual How to Survive Christmas. I should say How to Survive Christmas. I should say that in a different way. How to Survive Christmas. And the advice that I gave was get your Christmas shopping done as soon as possible, because I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe that we're going to see higher prices towards the end than the beginning. And if that's the case, you'll definitely want to get in. And, most people, they put it off. They go to Black Friday sales. Lots of people are shopping for themselves as well. So I would even start shopping this now and get it out of the way, get it done. Obviously have a budget and that what you're going to spend and how you're going to deal with prices. Now, if this whole tariff thing gets rolled back, you could see retailers get a little bit aggressive and go ahead and pull back on prices. But tough call. And I've just really told you one thing, now I'm telling you a totally opposite thing, which would probably mean that you'll get lower prices at the end towards Christmas. So if I haven't thoroughly confused you yet, pick a side and figure out what makes sense for you. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. We're up against a break, but stick around because I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. While you're at the website, make sure you sign up for the e-letter list and stay on top of what you need to know. By the way, very excited about this. Going to be interviewing a Prudent Money regular. He's on almost every month. And a guy that I would call the authority in stewardship, his name's Chuck Bentley. You probably heard of Chuck Bentley or heard of Crown Financial Ministries. I always tag that on to the back end of Crown. I might want to ask him about if that's actually correct. But it is Crown. And Crown is stewardship programs that are done all over the world and in many different languages, and bringing so many people, so many couples together in as far as stewardship and in that relationship that we have with stewardship and God. And he has a new book out. It's just really cool because it's a small book, but it's packed full of just great information. It's called The Economics of Righteousness. And we will be talking to Chuck tomorrow about this book, and the message that he wants us to hear. So looking forward to doing that. I always love having Chuck on the program, and so make sure that you listen to that. If you can't listen to it live, which I get that, most people are juggling schedules, you may not be in your car, or you can't take a break to find it on kdkr.org. You can always go and your favorite podcasting platform, and then listen to it at your convenience. So that's all there at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. So what does this mean for your wallet? Well, if they lower interest rates, mortgage holders, well, this article says mortgage holders win. I'm not so sure. That we'd have to see. I mean, they've called that many, many times before, and the mortgages are just in a weird spot right now, as they have been for a while. It says savers lose. Your 4.25% yields may not last much longer. Actually, the 4.25% yields for most of your big brokerage companies, and what I'm talking about when I say 4.25%, I'm talking about savings account, money market accounts in your big brokerage companies, more so than in banks and that sort of thing. But you're looking at, it's not a big drop from 4.25%, but it's about 3.8, 3.9%. And then it says, investors take note, quality AI stocks falling with speculative plays creates opportunity. Of course, written in pop culture finance style, that anytime there's a pullback, that's exactly what it is, and you should buy on a pullback. I would be real careful with these quality AI stocks, considering it could be a rough road ahead, and what you think is a pullback could be much, much, much more devastating from a loss standpoint. Just something to think about as you contemplate maybe what to do. Retail earnings show that consumers might back off spending. We talked about that. Smart money doesn't panic during a pullback. It prepares. That's a pop culture finance saying, if I've ever heard one. It says smart money doesn't panic during pullbacks. It prepares. It prepares for what? What's your take? Are you seeing opportunity or risk in this market? U.S. companies announced 153,000 job cuts in October, the highest for any October in 20 years. I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing at the question that preceded this in this particular article. What's your take? Are you seeing opportunity or risk in this market? I'm definitely seeing risk in this market. The excuse or reason, AI, I think it's, I want to see some more data, of course. But I think that the layoffs are a long time coming. I think that the economy and the market needs to go through what I would call an economic cleansing, and get kind of started back up on a fresh course. I haven't had something like that in a long time. But I am skeptical that these layoffs are about AI. Of course, it sounds better from the standpoint of we have a strong economy, and take, for instance, the layoffs and unemployment is due more to AI, which is technology, innovation, and that sort of thing, than economic weakness. They do pose a very interesting question in this article. It says a recent Wharton study backs this up. So 74% of enterprises are already seeing positive return on investment from AI. It's encouraging but also unsettling as companies prove AI boosts efficiency. What happens to the people behind those efficiencies? I still don't think this is a massive unemployment story. I really don't. Not to say we're all out of the woods yet, but I just don't. I think that it's going to go, once again, well, I know I've already talked about this, but it's worth repeating. I think it's going to go slower than we expect. And I think there's going to probably be, at this stage in the game, more hands-on from human from a human standpoint and an employee standpoint. But hey, we'll see what happens. The broader question: can the trillions being poured into AI deliver sustainable value without hollowing out the workforce? Now, as I say that, I do realize that quite a bit of jobs have been eliminated. 48,000 from UPS, potentially 30,000 from Amazon since 2020, and before that, since the recession of 2009. When you see, this is from John Challenger, he says, when you see companies making cuts of this size, it does signal a real shift in direction. But my question is, though, I get an initial shift to AI technology would produce quite a few layoffs, and maybe layoffs that needed to be happening regardless of what they assigned as the reason to them. So I don't know. We'll see. It's purely speculative. Okay, so the other question that I've been getting today is concerning Venezuela, and why are we amassing warships and 15,000 troops into that region? It says officials briefed Trump last week on options for military operations inside Venezuela. Sources told CNN as he weighs the risk and benefits of launching a scaled-up campaign to potentially oust President Nicolás Maduro. The U.S. military, meanwhile, has amassed more than a dozen warships and 15,000 troops into the region as part of what the Pentagon branded Operation Southern Spear. So there you have it. Venezuelan military, of course, lacks personnel and equipment, but they do have that ability to have a guerrilla-style warfare, which is a little unsettling. Of course, there's no question that military is no match for what the U.S. brings to the table. But boy, I tell you, when you start reading headlines like that, it starts to sound like war. Don't mean to be Captain Obvious, but that's just anyway. That's happening, and that's just definitely something you want to keep your eye on. Another thing we've been talking in the news about is robo-advisors and how they will change the landscape of the financial advisor industry. And someone wanted some comments on that, what I thought about that. I think that there's some things that AI can do with the advisor using the technology that could be useful for the financial advisor's business. Definitely think that that's the case. AI by itself as a robo-advisor, I don't think can effectively manage emotion, which drives so much in the industry of money. When it comes right down to it, I mean, decisions are made with emotion, and across that, you mix that up with values and all kinds of things. And, I do think that there's going to be a percentage of the population that loves the technology, that loves the idea, and will probably adapt that as their own. Like the majority of America, I think it's going to be a little bit more risk adverse as far as wanting to meet with a financial advisor, sit face to face. I was talking to somebody today, a client, and she said, I like to come up here, I like to sit face to face, whereas I know people want to do Zoom calls and that kind of thing, but I want to get caught up and talk about what's going on, and I'd rather do that in person. And there's still, even though we shifted to Zoom calls and everything else, this is, I think, people's preference, which is to have a little bit more connection face to face. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Just a reminder, I am going to be interviewing Chuck Bentley, CEO of Crown, and what a wonderful ministry and organization that's impacting the kingdom of God all over the world. Latest book, The Economics of Righteousness. You want to make sure that you listen in about and what he's got to say about this. One of the most probably, if there's such a thing as an expert in stewardship, he would definitely be it. Knows more about stewardship than anybody that I know. And looking forward to bringing him to the program tomorrow and talking a little bit about his new book, The Economics of Righteousness. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Until we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.